And we are also live streaming. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 13th regular meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Is that my feedback?
You don't hear feedback.
We're not hearing any feedback in the room.
Okay. I'm hearing myself talk. I'll try to fix it in a minute. So today is Wednesday, November 1st. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'm getting some feedback. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our co-chairs, Jose and Leah, will facilitate tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. I'm going to take a moment to go over some meeting logistics before we get started. This is a hybrid meeting. This meeting is being live streamed on our YouTube channel. A copy of the recording will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meeting and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning, ASL, and Spanish interpretation available. To access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon at the bottom right of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom right side of your screen. Committee members, please take a moment to change your chat settings to everyone so folks listening today can follow along. The meeting chat is part of the public record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. Please submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We may not be able to answer all the questions during the meeting, but they also become part of the public record. At today's meeting, we do have time for verbal public comment, but folks can also submit written public comment through our comment form online by calling 311 or emailing transition@portlandoregon.gov. And with that, I will pass it to Leah to review the agenda.
You, Julia. All right, so tonight's agenda includes committee business, followed by public comment, a transition media update, some committee engagement updates, and then we're going to review and vote on the work plan that we discussed at the last meeting, followed by an update on transition finances and an update on facilities improvements. Before we adjourn, we'll close the brief overview, of next steps. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So first, committee business. Jane, Terry, and Amy Wood are unable to attend tonight's meeting. And then before we get into some other things, as we've said before, we have space for announcements. If anyone wants to make announcements during the meeting, you can always reach out to the co-chairs and Julia. And for tonight, we have an announcement from David. So David, I'd like to hand it over to you for a couple minutes.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not going to take any questions or anything or drive this out. I just want to simply announce that I'm running for Portland City Council and my District 2. I'm been up and running for a little over a month now. I will put it into the chat, the email that is non-committee business for you guys to reach out if you want to do that, to talk about my campaign or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. All right, moving on. Next, we need to approve the October 17th meeting summary. Before doing so, does anyone have any edits they would like to make? Joe, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about David's announcement, and this is reflecting absolutely nothing but a genuine question. I presume that you've already checked and there's no conflict of interest to you being on the GTAC as well as running for council.
Yes, Joe, I have ran through with everybody to make sure. I even offered and when I announced to if people felt uncomfortable to step down. I will say this, I was going to announce a while back, but due to my schedule, I wasn't able to do that. However, please, I'm about to put my email into the chat. If you would like to discuss this more with me, I would be willing to do that. I am intentionally making sure that committee business stays committee business and not about David Brunel running for council. I'm going to insist on that. That's one reason why I've been keeping my camera off, because I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about committee business. Okay.
Thanks, David.
If anyone else has questions related to that, I think, Julia, I'm going to say you're the appropriate person to email with that. Great. Thank you very much. Back to the October 17th meeting summary. Does anyone have any suggested edits or questions?
There are just a few things that slipped through spell check to Nicole. Sorry, I'm just always that person.
We love that you're
Not
not
perfect.
Content.
Why don't you email them?
Other than spelling updates, anything with the content?
Take that.
I move approval.
Okay, we have Fred moved. Do I have a second?
I second.
Anita? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. Okay, then I want to move on to something very exciting. Talking about a preview of our co-chair rotation, since Jose and I will not be doing this forever. I know. Thanks, June. As a reminder, our bylaws includes the responsibilities of the co-chair outlined there, and it also states that co-chairs will rotate approximately every 3 months. Jose and I began our service at the beginning of September, which would mean at the end of November, we're up. However, we realized that we only have one meeting in December, right at the beginning, December 5th. Since December tends to be kind of a hard month to pin down schedules with travel and such, we were thinking it might be best to transfer over to new co-chairs at the beginning of January, when everyone has more time for onboarding, and it'll just make for an easier transition. So that's our recommendation, that January 1st, the new co-chairs will begin. So with that, we'd ask that folks start considering now whether or not you'd be interested in taking on the responsibility of being a co-chair. If you have any questions at all, I know that both Jose and I are happy to answer. And I am sure that Julia and June are as well. Feel free to reach out and email any of us about it. And if you are interested, let the co-chairs and Julia know, and we'll follow up with you from there. Great. Well, let's move on to the next slide then. Okay. Before we dive into things, as always, I'd like to read through our working agreements to remind us how we've agreed to act with each other. The working agreements state as follows. 1, in discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals. Offer constructive suggestions. 2, approach different opinions with curiosity, seek to understand. 3, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work. 4, arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you're unable to attend a meeting. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers. Every time I read this, I think I need to do more of that. 5, keep multitasking to a minimum. 6, keep focus on the objectives of the meetings. Utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing via email. Next slide, please. 7, honor the decisions of the group. 8, contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meet your needs. 9, step up, step back. Collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. 10, embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools. Finally, 11, use I statements. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to pass it on back to Julia to introduce public comment.
Thank you, Leah. So as always, we do have some time held for verbal public comment. We asked folks to sign up ahead of time, and we didn't have anyone sign up for tonight. I know a lot of folks might be next door at City Council But I do want to just give a moment and see if anyone who's in attendance, I'm not sure if there's anyone in the room, but I know I have some folks virtually. If you would like to give any public comment, I'll just pause for a minute and you could raise your Zoom hands, or if there's anyone in the room, someone there could just let me know.
We had one person in the room and I can't see that now.
I'm still trying to look it.
I'm sorry, what?
Nothing, never mind.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, thank you for the silence. I'll just remind folks listening in again, we welcome public comment at any time. You can submit it in writing through our website by calling 311 or by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And with that, I will turn it, I believe, to Jose. Thanks.
Thank you, Julia. Next slide, please. As requested by the committee, we have Daniel McCarl James with us today from the transition team to provide a transition media update. And it was not just Amy who requested it, just for the record. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. Hello, good evening. Nice to see all of you in person. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. As I think already discussed and identified, it's been a very busy day in the transition. They are still talking about the org chart. They had 17 amendments to it, and they're still talking about it. And so if we're lucky, maybe we will get a decision tonight. And it sounds like we're very close. Next slide, please. Part of what I want to do is I want to cover these objectives, which is to provide all of you an update and some context on media relations at the city and how that sort of looks today and what it's going to look like in the future, especially as we're talking about the future org structure. And in addition to that, I want to introduce some metrics that we've been capturing since coming on board here with the transition. And then I want to shift towards you all. How GTAC as members can work with myself and my communications team, because I think there's a lot of shared focus here in our work. And so I'm excited to begin working with you all more closely in 2024. And one of the things that I'll be sort of highlighting or identifying at a high level is just the multicultural media plans that we have in store for 2024. I know that part of this group's task is to reach multilingual communities, especially those communities that have been historically underrepresented and or not represented at all in civic decision-making. And so I look forward to sharing some of those high-level thoughts with you and maybe discussing how GTAC can potentially support that effort as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're talking about the org structure right now. And so for context, I just wanted to sort of circle where communications will be in the new form of government. Right now, we don't have a single communications office here at the city. As we all know, we have 26 bureaus. Some have comms teams and some do not. So it's very interesting to sort of, I know your mind is blown. In addition to that, my transition communications team, which is there's 3 of us, as well as the unified communications team, which there's another 3. They are sort of these adjunct and or temporary teams that are in place currently in the absence of not having a centralized communications team. And because we haven't had a centralized communications team and because we've sort of been temporary in nature, the budget, resources, and staff, of course, are unstable. And so we're looking forward very much tonight to hopefully passing this org chart where we will have a centralized communications team. And so with the absence of not having a centralized communications team in the city's history, what that means is we don't have an employee communications infrastructure that exists. We also have very confusing sort of mazes and phone trees as it relates to who to go to for what information You all, I've heard you on your many dialogues have expressed that similar sort of dissatisfaction of how difficult it is for you to receive information, and we couldn't agree more. And so working towards the centralized communications, including social media relations, is a part of what we're working toward as we implement the new org structure. Next slide, please. And so here's just some metrics, if you will, as it relates to where we are in the in the media landscape. And so, of course, the transition started, thank you, June, for moving that. The transition started in November 2022. And so this is sort of a look back, if you will, in terms of the number of articles that were placed and or we call them hits in communication land, the number of hits that we've had in terms of story placements. And so you'll see that in November, we started with 2022. The reason why in March it says comms, that's when my team and I started. So the communications team on the transition didn't exist until March of this year. And you're seeing that the numbers are trending upwards. I do not have October's, but that is looking like it's going to be in the 20s, maybe even 30s, in terms of number of hits that we've received and in terms of story placement. So we are certainly working overtime as it relates to getting those hits. As you see, we're averaging about 12 articles a month, which I think is pretty good. That's 4 or 3 articles, unique articles, reaching different sort of Portlanders. And then I also here on the right had indicated what the trending topic was of that month. And so the reason why, as an example, in July, you're scratching your head and saying, gosh, 24 articles in July, what happened? Well, that was when the districts were the hot trending topic. And so our shift on the communications team continuously changes as well. In addition to supporting all of these teams, we also support things like facilities. That's not on here. We're supporting budget related things. So in addition to just all of these topics, these are some of the other behind the scenes projects that our team is supporting and working on. Next slide. And so this is a matrix, if you will. June, you might need to move it this side now. This is a matrix, if you will, that captures the multiple news outlets that we have. And you'll see here that they're alphabetical, starting with the Associated Press. And so I consider that to be outside of Oregon and or national coverage. And then you'll see green represents local, purple represents TV, red represents local. And you're also seeing some highlights. What that highlight means is those are the people or the news organizations that are capturing our stories and or amplifying our stories the most. And so that's K2, KGW, KOIN, OPB, the Oregonian, Portland Mercury, and Willamette Week. But you'll see here that there's a long list of folks that we've either worked specifically with in terms of placement, in terms of relationship building. And so that's some really exciting, interesting metrics for us to look at. And I think that's credit to our public information officer, the PIO. Most of these stories we are finding are including our messages as well as our details. There are a few that are basically sort of pajama reporting, maybe. They're not, what I mean by that is that they're in their pajamas and reporting and not actually sort of talking to us and or getting some information directly from us. And so that's what I mean by they're not necessarily working with our PIO. In addition to that, you'll see that we've got the local English-speaking media market covered. I'm looking at this list and I'm not seeing a lot of multicultural media. Our PIO since this summer has actually been working on building those relationships with our multilingual, large and small media outlets, and they're really, really excited about working with us. And they've asked, of course, do you have people that speak our language? And so I'm looking at some of you here in the room because we're maybe looking to enroll you as you are going out and speaking into the community, and especially reaching our hard to reach voters. Would this be of interest to you to potentially be one of the spokespeople here talking to those multilingual, multicultural media outlets on behalf of the city? And then the final thing that I'll sort of say here as it relates to the dailies. So those are news networks that are continuously pushing stories. You'll see that 74% of our coverage that we've captured today, which by the way, according to this from November 2022 to September is nearly 150 articles. 74% of that coverage is local with the near daily news outlets. And of course, the reason why we're seeing that is because the daily news networks have the largest staff. So of course, they're going to be covering our stories more often than the Chinese Times or some other small multicultural, multilingual news publication. Next slide, please. And so exploring a role for GTAC members. One of the things that, this is, by the way, the Independent Salary Commission that's pictured here. One of the things that our communication team has done earlier on in the transition is we've worked with the IDC and the ISC on conducting some media training so that you all are warmed up and or ready and or feel more comfortable being on camera and or on radio as you are talking to reporters and or journalists. And so one of the things that we have begun doing, as I mentioned, is our PIO has been working with the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management and the mayor's office to begin modeling the new form of government and saying, hey, we're here, we're looking to build this relationship with you. And in turn, as I said earlier, they're looking for native speakers. And so we wondered if some members of the GTAC would be interested in participating and serving as a spokesperson on behalf of the transition on an on-call basis to either be on camera or on air to do these interviews as needed. Unfortunately, our team at this moment in time, because it's a busy moment at this moment in time with the city org, we have limited capacity, but we have a lot of requests, if you will, from the media. And so one of the things that I think, as you're considering, maybe enrolling in this process, is we're looking to generate a list of interested GTAC members who might be interested in serving on an on-call as needed basis. We know that vacations happen. We know that many of you have full-time jobs. Sometimes reporters can be flexible, if you will, about being interviewed after hours, but generally speaking, they also work during the day. And so we will do our best to sort of go through the roster and determine who might be the best spokesperson given the language requirements, given everyone's availability, et cetera. Some of you might be available only on Tuesdays, as an example. So we'll take those things into consideration. If you are interested, next slide, please. If you are interested to serve in an on-call as needed basis, I am looking for what I'm calling a bench. I'm looking for a bench of spokespeople for us to tap into, especially if you're fluent in multiple languages. Again, we're happy to conduct those media trainings with you. And my PIO is happy to do what we call a warm-up, if you will, so that you feel more comfortable and ready to talk to a journalist before actually going on air or on camera. And if you are interested, please email a GTAC staff person to express your interest and we'll coordinate the next steps. What did I miss, Julia, June, or GTAC members? Or are there any questions?
I have a question. Oh, sorry, I forgot to do it again.
We need to go ahead.
For God's sakes, let's go.
It's nice. But anyway, so I'm assuming that you have already translated in different languages all of the information.
Yes, I'm excited to share that we have several fact sheets that provide context about the transition and their different components, whether it's the Independent Salary Commission, whether they're the districts themselves, whether it's the new role of the mayor and the council, et cetera. We have a number of fact sheets that are currently translated, and those fact sheets can be found at portland.gov/transition/resources. And so you'll see in the educational section, there's a variety of fact sheets in a variety of languages that are ready to go. And you can also request hard copies if you're looking for hard copies to hand deliver to folks. I appreciate the hard copies personally. That's how I absorb information better. You can also request those from our staff.
Thank you.
Me?
Glad to see you, Daniel. When we spoke, you kind of outlined a little bit more of the strategy around how the transition team is going to approach media and communications. And I'm wondering if you could just give any kind of word or information about that and how you all are thinking about that at this point. I'm sure it's changed since then.
Yeah. So as I mentioned very early on, and I wasn't sure at the altitude in which I needed to travel here. But to answer your question very simply, Amy, one of the things that I had mentioned early on is the city didn't have a centralized communications team. And so as a result of that, we have public information officers that are sending press releases through their Outlook. We have others that are sending it through a different platform. The problem with that is that it's confusing to reporters and we all are operating off of different lists. And so one of the things, to answer your question, Amy, is to begin introducing some technology into our way in which we do media relations. So I'm in conversations with a vendor named Cision. And Cision is a way that helps, number one, distribute information through press releases here locally, but also on a state and or national scale. And in addition to that, it will help my public information officers as well as other information officers in the new form of government to potentially tap into this tool so that we can correct misinformation that's out there. I know that there's certain networks that like to spread misinformation about Portland, and it really harms our reputation. And so I'm looking to course correct the way in which we're able to respond to misinformation and or national networks that are putting pretty slanted, misinformed information out there. So hopefully that answers your question in a little bit more of a simplified way. Thank you. Fred?
Oh, thank you, Jose. First, I would add the North Portland Review.
Oh, great.
List of contacts.
Perfect.
Because I think they ran an article already, and they're good reporters. They're trying to do the best for Northeast, especially St. John's, which is, we feel, a marginalized community in our neighborhood. You talk about, I'd like to go to the org issue. You talked about a unified communication team, and I'm interested very much in this plethora of PIOs, public information officers, in various bureaus that don't talk to each other, only talk to their own bureaus. And when I heard Mike yesterday, Jordan, talk about the org plan for the city administrator and having the communications officer in there, I did not hear any intimation that there would be some centralization of communications, taking those various positions and putting them together in that office as a unified communication team. Can you speak to that and what your understanding of that is at this point, knowing that the reorg process or the change process is a work in progress?
Sure, I appreciate the question, and there's three questions within that. So the first thing that I'll address is the PIOs. Public information officers are beginning to work and have begun to work with each other in more recent years. And so they are regular. I was a former PIO, and we had met regularly together to sort of exchange ideas and all that other good stuff. And so that is already happening, and that has been happening for a number of years now. As it relates to the unified communications, currently, I'm an extension of unified communications team, and that I work in the Office of Management and Finance, and that the transition is citywide. And so you can sort of kind of put me into that ballpark if you would, but technically I'm not. So as a unified communications team is designed is to sort of help with the centralization of resources. So as an example of that, rather than having 26 subscriptions of the Oregonian, we have one. And so those are the examples of in which we're trying to reduce waste and instead centralize those resources. And so I hope that that's an example of that. As it relates to your question about the absence of conversation related to PIOs, depending on how many service areas we have in the new form of government, it is really important for PIOs to be nestled within their specific subject area of expertise. And so as an example, I don't know if I would personally feel comfortable talking about public safety because that's not something that I'm knowledgeable in. And so I think what you're going to see is that there will be a central communications team, but within the service areas themselves, they will still have PIOs that will service that will service the service areas, that will work in the service areas. But those decisions in terms of how big and how small, they have not come to fruition yet. What we first need to do is establish an org chart and structure, and then begin to budget against that or into that.
Some uniformity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating some tough questions coming at me, especially as we start to get into the budget. I wonder if part of what you do is anticipate those kind of a risk management exercise and try to bake those into your content. And is that something that we'll be privy to or that we can suggest to you?
Yes. Similarly, I also have concerns and questions about budget, right? We've never budgeted into a central unified org structure before. And as you're hearing at council, this is why they're going late. They too have a lot of questions on how to do that. We haven't done it either. And so we're looking very much forward to also having a tough questions document in terms of how it works, what those messages are. But again, all of those things unfortunately won't be able to be delivered until we have an org structure in place, and then in turn be able to begin to deliver sort of a one-pager, if you will, of what does it look like now? What does the budget structure look like now in the new form of government as we look forward towards 2024 and 2025?
Thank you. Bill?
Thank you. Just clarification, when you were encouraging individuals to sort of be unbenched to call, are you asking only for native speakers of a language other than English, or a broader category?
I appreciate the question, Bill. Any of you, if any of you are interested in speaking or serving as a spokesperson, we're happy to welcome you onto the bench.
Okay, thank you.
Before I call Amy, Daniel, I want to first thank Destiny. She posted a list of documents from the resource list that are not translated yet.
Okay.
I'm sure you know all about those.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just so that you know that we also know all about this. So
Yeah.
Amy?
I'm not sure how this fits into like practicality, but just would be remiss not to name it, which is that it seems like there's not like a aspirational narrative around transition. And I know that like it's difficult because like you guys are doing your jobs in silos, and that's an extremely difficult thing to do. But I'm wondering if there's anything we could do to contribute to that as GTAC, or anything that could be done. Because I'm just remiss that such an exciting thing is happening, and the way it's being framed in the media is like so granular and so a story that isn't aspirational, where we're transitioning a whole entire government, and that's extremely cool and fun and could have really cool, fun like messengers. And so I don't know how operative that comment is, but I just wanted to put it out there that would be cool.
I appreciate that. And what I'll say about that is, there are journalists here in town that have sensational headlines. And part of that goal is so that you click on that article. But then as you read, to their credit, as you read that article, sometimes they're balanced and sometimes they're not. And so, it's our hope and our goal and our job to, of course, correct misinformation when it's known. There are limited tools that I have in my tool belt. So as an example, I did not know about the North Portland Review. They're not searchable by a Google search or a Bing search. And so, those are things that I would like to get better at. But because of the way that we're set up, it's just a little bit hard. But having said that, Amy, I know that our public information officer was looking forward to getting together with you. And so when you're able to, we would love to have coffee with you if you'd like to talk about that more.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Amy, and now I'm glad you said that, because I've had recent conversations, and not just with the transition, where there's a lot of media on one side, but then when I talk to people, most of my friends are on the other side.
Right.
But no one's covering that.
Right.
Because it's not as sensational, like with Measure One we talked about. So it's definitely common all over the place. Destiny?
one thing that I was wondering, because like I'm looking at these Vietnamese, Slavic Russian and Somali, Burmese is in here, which I would love to see Burmese added, is that I don't think anyone, I'm assuming here on GTAC can provide that support. And I think earlier in one of our GTAC meetings, one of the ways that the transition communications and the culture was going to be built was through internal employee support programs already. I'm wondering if there is staff that have these skill sets that can get professional development, some additional hours, opportunities to engage in this work if they're already kind of getting this information. Just an idea to help address that lack of support and a way to de-silo again this work. I don't know.
Thanks, Destiny. I appreciate the comment, and we're happy to enroll employees as they are able to perform that work. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. That's the time we had for today. So thank you, Daniel, again for coming. And we could get the slides back, please. Maybe. Well, either way, what we're going to move on to is committee engagement updates. Like always, we want to hold some time to have those. Next slide, please. Thank you. And first, I'll ask June to share insights on community engagement.
Hi, everyone. June Reyes, she, her pronouns, transition engagement staff. I wanted to give a couple minutes of an update. Just, but before I do that, I just want to I have a quick announcement. I'm looking at you, Nicole, because this is about you. I just want to let everyone know that today is Nicole's last GTAC meeting. We appreciate her so much. Our team is really going to miss her. We tell her that as much as we can. Nicole is going to be transitioning to a new position within the Office of Management Finance as the Clean Air Construction Coordinator. So I just want to give that quick update to let you all know that you will, this is the last meeting you'll see Nicole at. So I'm seeing applauses in there. So that wasn't at my actual update, but it's about the transition. I just wanted to get that out there. So November signifies about a year into our government's transition. And as transition staff, we use this moment to have a staff retreat and really think about the work that is left to do. So I just felt like it was important to update you all on our focus and our strategy for implementing the transition engagement plan that you all approved, and it guides not only your work, but also the transition team's work. So first, it's important to recognize GTAC is a key partner for public engagement, not only offering community insights as the main public engagement body, but also providing that additional support for community education. But I also think it's important to clarify that the city is ultimately accountable for community engagement, and that transition staff, we have the responsibility to create those spaces for the public to engage, to coordinate public engagement efforts, and to lead our communication efforts that kind of tie in together. So from this reflection point, as a transition team, where we're going to be focusing our engagement time and resources on is one, mapping out what engagement looks like for the remaining transition work areas. So really looking also at your GTAC work plan and kind of making sure that those times to be able to have larger public engagement and have folks check in is available. Next is, as transition staff, we talked about how we're committed to increasing the amount of presentations that we do, especially those groups left out of City Hall. And then really the third thing is we're going to continue working closely with the voter education contract. And so that, that strategy together is very cohesive. And though our focuses are probably going to be different in terms of engagement tools, we're going to try to talk about all of it together when we can. And so I just wanted to highlight some things that might feel different moving forward. In the monthly engagement status updates, we do cover, staff engagement updates, but you might see more insights as staff. We're trying to increase the amount that we're doing. you'll hopefully see more opportunities coordinated by transition staff to speak at community groups, especially folks left out of City Hall. And then, you all have your GTAC work plan. Also, you'll hopefully be able to see a timeline of engagement events that are related to that work and are sort of integrated. So I think, coming out of that retreat and kind of at this reflection point, we wanted to let you all know what was happening.
Thanks, June. Now I'm going to see if any of you guys have any engagement reflections of things you've done. But before I ask for those, I just want to take a second to reflect on the fact that June is so awesome. I've had a few specific requests for some of the presentation I'm giving, where I was at one meeting, they were previewing my presentation coming up, and it was all about the org chart, which, as you know, is not in our current presentation. I had another one where they wanted just ranked choice voting. So just ranked choice voting. So I've shot those requests over to June, who has changed presentations and gotten me new information, which is really appreciated. So if someone tells you I want a presentation on something, ask. I think we can work on it and get it done. So I wanted to say, I know I've said thank you, but I appreciate it and what you do for us. So does anyone else have any reflections or things about community engagement you'd like to share? Any interesting stories? No? Okay. Well, then we'll just move on. Oh, we got one.
Destiny.
Okay. Leah.
Getting about us, Jose. I just wanted to say quick, over the past couple of weeks, I've reached out to some folks that I was kind of holding off on to see if they'd be interested. And it's been really fun to see what it's like with a cold call. Everyone, like to Jose's point, everyone wants something different, which complicates it a little bit, but it's been fun to hear back from everyone that they're excited to hear from GTAC, which has been good for me. Because I think when we were first up and running, some of my outreach was people being like, I don't know if we need to know anything yet, but now I'm like, people are excited. So I don't know. I don't have any strong updates of like things I've heard recently, so much as people are excited to invite us in, which feels nice.
Thank you. Destiny?
Thank you. And also, I feel like I believe it was the last comment or last session, someone from Multnomah County was like, a lot of the budget is going to culturally specific organizations on education. And it's very true. I think we've talked a lot about neighborhood associations, and that's a great place to, step into, inform, hear conversations, but that only, touches so much of the general public as well. Sometimes there's not renters there, there's not low income families, there's, sometimes there's not single parent households and things like that. So really trying to be mindful of, the general public, but then again, like multicultural, and I think Amy has kind of pointed to this, multicultural communication and outreach, it takes time, it takes trust building. We're asking a lot, just like a lot of people are aware of city staff has limitations in time. Culturally based organizations are usually working with even less time and resources. And so I'm at least really excited and hopeful to talk about a better communication strategy from the city as a whole, because there's only so much that we can do here. And I think the transition team and supporting that awareness and also trying to push for better. So thank you. And I'm excited to keep building those bridges. It does take time. So I know there's a few of us here that feel like, at least I feel, is a huge uplift to bring individually. And sometimes it's hard. So I thank you all for your grace as well.
Thanks, Destiny. David?
Oh, I'm actually just literally going to piggyback off of Destiny. She was saying some of the stuff I'm thinking about. One of the things I really wanted to just point out and highlight was, first of all, yeah, it's going to take more time to reach out to more ethnic minority community, but we also have to be very intentional to do that, because it is very easy for us to say, hey, we reached out to Willamette, hey, we reached out to the Mercury, hey, we did this, that, and the other thing. And oftentimes people forget that you need to have a calling in, and in order to do that, you have to have a reaching out. And you have to be intentional, especially when historically there are left out communities. You have to reach out to them specifically. And that's all I was going to say.
Thanks, David. Last call for anyone else? No? No? Okay, well then now I'm gonna turn it over to Lori from the Work Plan Work Group to introduce the revised work plan. Next slide, please. And Lori.
Thank you, Jose. Yes, on behalf of the Work Plan Work Group, I'm here to share with you the updates that we put together after our last session. And also wanted to thank everybody in this committee from our last meeting for the really robust discussion. Gave us a lot to think about and provide updates to this work plan. So we did meet and reviewed all the input and proposed revisions, and the revised work plan was distributed a week ago and posted on the website. So hopefully everyone got a chance to take a look at that. We wanted to acknowledge the sentiment shared by some of us that this is a lot of work and recognize that. And also wanted to remind you that there are different forums for completing these tasks, not just the GTAC meeting. Tasks will be completed, outside of the meeting, such as community presentations, in time-limited work groups, such as for code revisions, in the 2 subcommittees that we've approved, the districts and council operations and the voter candidate education and outreach subcommittees, and then, of course, in our full committee meetings. So next, I'm going to review the work group's proposed revisions to the plan, and then we'll have time for questions and discussion. And the goal tonight is to vote on the work plan. So next slide, please. What you're seeing here is additions are underlined and deletions are struck through, and you'll see the different sections. So I'm not showing you the whole work plan, just the parts that we have changes. So the first proposed revision is to expand the purpose section by clarifying the following, and I'll just read these off to you. Co-chairs will use the work plan as a roadmap, and committee and subcommittee agendas for reference. Will reference the work plan. The committee will periodically review the work plan to assess progress and evaluate whether emergent issues are in scope. Committee may agree to iterate and update timelines as needed, particularly to ensure responsiveness to community requests and discourse. And committee will share the work plan on the transition webpage and make it available to City Council and the transition team. The second proposed revision is to add the following language to our commitment to conduct 2 quarterly community presentations per member, with at least 1 provided to communities historically left out of City Hall. So what we're adding is, with city support, co-develop a strategy to meet this deliverable. Next slide, please. So the third proposed revision is to delete task B3, which read act as another conduct for receiving employee feedback, providing an alternative to current channels to mitigate potential issues with internal review processes or employee discomfort with existing avenues. I think we got enough feedback around that, and we were told that that was out of our scope. The fourth proposed revision is to delete the parenthetical at the end of C2. So we would keep the bulk of C2 and just take off the end part that was in the parentheses that read inclusive of the roles and responsibilities of future district coalition offices and requesting timely release of district coalition RFP. We just didn't think it was necessary to call those out specifically. And then the fifth and final proposed revision is not substantive, and we just cleaned up the language of D4. So next slide, please. And then the work group does want to make clear that there are 3 items that we discussed at our last meeting about whether or not to keep, and we recommend keeping, and the staff agrees that they are within our scope. And that was the advise on future service delivery improvements, and recommend how to enhance community participation and inclusion in the mayor and city administrator offices, And last, recommend tools or additional resources to improve engagement around the budget to city budget office. So we'll keep all of those. So do any work group members from the work group plan have anything to add to my overview before I turn it back over to Leah to facilitate the discussion and then a vote? Okay, turn it over to you, Leah.
First off, thank you so much to Lori and every single person that was on this work plan work group. This is an incredible amount of work that is sure to just make us so much more effective moving forward, and especially to make our work transparent to the city, to the public, to everyone in terms of what we're working on. So just a wholehearted thank you to everyone. What the goal is for tonight is for us to vote on this. And again, as a committee, our goal is always consensus, that all of us are okay with things. So before moving forward, my question is, do people have comments or questions on the work plan as it's currently written that would prevent them from voting yes on this? So with that, I'll call on the hands of people raised. And Juliet, I've got you first.
I don't have anything that would prevent me from voting yes on it. Are we commenting just on the changes or anything?
It's my belief we're commenting on changes for tonight, since last meeting we were discussing, we had discussed the entire work plan.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'm just in general concerned about budget and not taxing our staff resources. So that is, doesn't require a change. It's just a comment about A1, co-develop a strategy to meet this deliverable with city support. It's not necessarily a big deal, but I can't really tell from that. And then the other one was pre-existing, and I apologize for not mentioning this sooner, but it's D4, and it's about recommending creation of a resource guide on civic engagement. I don't want to tax staff, wasn't sure how that would come to be. And that also sounds like something that neighborhood coalitions have traditionally done quite a bit of, and I don't know if that's going to come out in the RFP, but I think just, as an aspiration, that's fine and would not keep me from voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. I'll take comments and questions from people, and then at the end, I'll see if any people from the work group have anything that they want to respond to with this. Fred.
What? Was my hand up?
I don't know why I looked at you and said that.
I was just nodding
Hand raised.
agreement with
Fred was looking at me.
Sure.
Sorry, Joe. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Just two small things. I like the idea of periodically reviewing the work plan to assess progress, but I think periodic is not specific enough. I think we ought to agree how frequently and do it on a really regular basis. Things are moving awfully fast, and so I don't know if that's, certainly at least every 2 months, maybe more frequently than that, but I'd really like to specify a period rather than just say periodically. And the other is that I just want to be clear. I think Lori was clear, but I want to be 100% clear that taking out those 2 items about the district coalitions doesn't mean that they're outside of our scope. It just means we're not going to call those out specifically.
Thank you, Joe. Fred.
Okay.
Oh, you have your hand raised.
Yes, Joe's comment on the timing and mapping this out for our workload and staff's. I remember at the last meeting, I asked for like a summary of the subcommittees, what possible new subcommittees may ensue once the 2 that are being formed now get underway, do their job. And then a calendar, I think that as much as Joe pointed out, just sort of a framework, the overall work plan. It's immense. I love it. I'm ready to, roll up my sleeves and get to work on a subcommittee, maybe not every subcommittee, but to know when to expect reports back, when we're going to move to the next iteration of a subcommittee based on one of the tasks that we've laid out for ourselves would help, be very helpful. And it's, I know, more work, but I think would help everyone understand where we are each month as we proceed. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred. To that one, I will just say, it's my understanding that that will be the co-chair responsibility moving forward, which I think would be great in terms of putting together a calendar of when we're working on things and making sure people are aware of how our meetings connect back to the work plan. So a lot of this will inform how co-chairs organize meetings moving forward, which I think is a great point. And I can just speak from like my experience in the co-chair role. It will actually be very welcome to make sure that we're staying on task with things, because it's really easy to like move towards the nearest shiny object. But with that, Jose, do you have a comment?
Just to that point.
Yeah.
Just be aware, we're not allowed to use calendars outside the city's software. Because I tried to get a calendar going with like Google calendars or something like that.
Really?
Can't, we're not allowed. I did ask a while back. So there will be something rolling out, but it's might not be what you think it is.
We can't have a Google Calendar as a group.
Correct.
That's all right.
Does anyone from the
Yeah.
Does anyone from the work plan work group want to address any of the questions or comments that were brought up? Okay. Well, I do want to make one proposal then. Do we have a hand? Sorry. Zach.
Zach.
Hey, Leah, and hi, everybody. Zach Curl, part of the work group. I just wanted to respond to, I think, Joe's question, or maybe clarification that our removal of the parenthetical that was spelling out a very specific kind of task within trying to advocate for a advanced communication around the district community district offices. That is how you interpreted it. It is something that ultimately we decided probably is discussed and determined by a subcommittee, and having it included in the broader general work plan was maybe not necessary.
Thank you, Zach. Lori?
I also want to address Joe's comment regarding the periodic reviews. I think originally I had proposed quarterly, and I do like some kind of a structure around it, and was convinced that the way the work plan would be used, that the co-chairs would use it to create agendas, felt like, okay, it's going to be looked at regularly, and then periodically we could look at it. Perhaps another suggestion is that as new co-chairs come in, they get a chance to take a look at the work plan and the horizon of agenda topics and kind of put their 2 cents on it. And maybe they even come to us and say, here's the next 3 months horizon. This is how it aligns with the work plan. And that might be a way to see both at the same time. But I agree with your more structured approach, Joe.
Thank you, Lori. Money?
I'm responding to Joe as well, that I would say that in addition to the co-chairs, that it should be the chairs of the subcommittees as well that are going to be using this. So I would say that subcommittee should be updating each section or whatever parts of the work plan that they touch. And then in collaboration, when we start, I know the subcommittee work is new. So however we do those report outs, that the chairs of the subcommittees are working with the chair of the full committee to continue to use the work plan as an iterative document.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, I like both of those ideas. And I think that Lori's suggestion or idea, because if you didn't really suggest it, I'll take credit, that it be part of the transition of the co-chairs, that as the co-chairs depart, their sort of review and update would be valuable, and then the new co-chairs take the handoff and might modify.
Thank you. What I'm hearing from everyone at this point is it seems that there's broad agreement about the work plan, and the only sticking point is about how often we're reviewing it. The proposal that's been brought up is that we could come back and quarterly review it. Quarterly also happens to be how often we shift co-chairs, so that works pretty nicely there. And so it would offer an option for co-chairs to look at it for the general GTAC and also for the individual chairs of the group. So the thing that I propose that we vote on tonight is the work plan as written with the addition of, instead of, I can't remember the language right now. Where is this? Instead of periodic updates to it, that we would edit it to say, we will look at this quarterly. Do any people have other hesitations with the work plan as it's written before we vote?
Leah?
Julia?
Sorry, just right now being a perfect example that co-chair rotation is not always exactly quarterly. Right, so this time it's 4 months. I think it might have been 4 actually last. So if it's about tying it to co-chair rotation, I wonder if the language shouldn't just say that instead of a specific period of time that may or may not align with co-chair rotation. Thank you.
I feel no particular ways about that. Does anyone else want to take a stance on whether it should be quarterly or with co-chair rotation? Feel strongly one over the other?
Like the co-chair rotation.
Co-chair rotation? Okay. Okay, I will change my proposal for what we vote on tonight then, which is voting on the work plan as it's written, but editing it to say that we will look at it with each co-chair rotation to update as necessary. Fred, I see your hand raised.
I move adoption with your amendment.
We do not technically need a motion to do this, but as long as we're doing it, why not? It seems fun, right? Anyone want a second, make it feel official?
Second.
Second by Juanita. Okay. For this vote, since it's not an official one of making a recommendation, we don't need to do a roll call. I'm going to ask people to turn on their cameras. And for a simple thumbs up, thumbs down, since it sounds like we have general consensus on this. So thumbs up if you would like to vote for adopting this work plan. Great. Excellent. Everyone in favor then. Thank you very much. Again, thank you so much to the group of people who worked so hard to put this work plan together. I am absolutely certain this is going to make our work together so much better. We have a little bit more time for discussion of the work plan. Does anyone else have any final comments that they want to make or additional appreciation that they want to throw at the people that put this together? Jose, I see your physical hand raised.
Yes, of course, all the appreciation to all the hard work that the work group did. But since we are running ahead of time, now may be an excellent time for you to incorporate a breather.
Oh my gosh. I think we're going to do this. We're going to take our very first breather. So it is 7:04. Let's take a quick break. Feel free to turn off your camera if you'd like. Grab a snack, run to the restroom, whatever makes sense for you. And at exactly 7:10, we will be back online and start with our meeting again. Wow. Okay. Thank you.
Hey.
Thank you, Jose. Welcome back, everyone, from our very first ever breather.
Were
Sorry,
we
let me
supposed to
get myself
breathe?
6 months to do it. Yeah, next time. This was just practice.
I thought.
In the work plan, yeah. Juliet said, we'll put breathing in
That's
there.
why we never did it before.
All right, moving on from that. In our work plan, it states that the committee will receive expense and budget reviews. So Shannon Fairchild with the City Budget Office is here, I believe, to share an expenses to date update with us. I'm going to hand it over here.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Fairchild. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with working on the charter transition team on a temporary basis, and I am with the City Budget Office. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. Next slide, please. All right. So some of you may have seen this slide before, but regardless, it's worth revisiting. So we're all using the same terminology, and as we kind of go through the next couple slides. So there are different types of expenses or costs. So there's one-time costs and there's ongoing. One-time costs or time limited in nature, and they have a beginning and an end, and they're usually very project focused or based. A good example of that is the charter transition cost to implement or create the new form of government. So the costs that we're going to be going over in the next slide are all one-time in nature. Ongoing costs are expenses that occur year after year. So an example of this would be the cost estimates. If you had watched the work session yesterday, that discussed the estimated cost for the proposed organizational chart for the new form of government. Those were ongoing in nature, as well as the resolution today. All those costs that were presented were all ongoing in nature. They were not the one-time costs that we're going to talk about here shortly. Okay, does anyone have any questions on that, or okay to move on?
We'll wait until the end to gather questions.
Okay, sounds great. Next slide, please. Okay, so this next slide provides the actuals to date, as well as cost estimates and three main areas. So we have the groupings of the transition, project management, and administration, followed with more information at the cost category. We also will be discussing the election methods and voter education outreach and small donor and elections, as well as the kind of the final buckets of costs related to the one-time transition related costs, or the governance or facilities related costs that I will not be talking about really extensively, but they are something that we do include in our cost estimates as we go through that. In terms of the actuals, the amount of time just to navigate you to this chart, when we're looking at the actuals, which is the third column to the right, we're talking about the time frame of last fiscal year, so July 1 of 2022, all the way through September 30th of this year, 2023. So the almost 4 million that you see at that bottom at the very bottom, that is for that time period. The column to the far right, we're calling that kind of the total three-year cost estimate. The cost estimates that includes last fiscal year, because we do deal in fiscal years because I am from the budget office, and that's kind of our language here. So it's last fiscal year as well as this fiscal year, which ends June 30th of 2024, as well as the whole next year. So July 1 of 2024 through June 30th of 2025. So we're looking at like a 3-year period when we talk about these costs. So to get a little bit into more detail, we have in the first category of the transition project management and administration, we have the transition team costs, which is our estimated cost estimate of about 5.8 million. We've spent a little bit over 1.2 million to date. These staff they include project managers, communications and community engagement professionals, human resource staff, financial analysis, and they're housed kind of throughout the city. So we have folks that are within the city or the chief administrator's office. We have folks in human resources, the auditor's office, in different areas of the city, all that are kind of working on a limited term basis and are captured here. And then the second bucket, we have the consulting support. So that is related to supporting the change management work at the city that is supporting the transition team and working with the entire kind of leadership throughout within the city to work on the forthcoming change and strategies in order to implement this huge cultural change that we have over the next couple of years. And then the next in the final kind of category within the transition project and management and administration, we have community engagement, communications, and community bodies. The investment here really supports the independent district commission and salary commission, and then the ongoing work of the government transition advisory committee, so all of you, and then as well as the technical assistance for the districting process that was launched right after the election. So that's all kind of the actuals that are presented here, as well as the total 3-year cost estimates are really what make up that body of work. All right. And so moving on to election methods, we have the voter education and outreach. So we do have folks that are working on this now, but they're really captured. I just want to be clear that even though there's a 0 here, it doesn't, we're capturing the folks that are working on this really in the above category in terms of the staff costs and some of the community engagement. The cost estimate of that $1,075,000, that represents some contracted, it really represents work around government communication channels, Canada education, in a partnership focused on hard to reach voters. And so over the next couple of months, we're going to start seeing kind of expenditures show up in that category. And then the small donor elections is the city's public campaign financing system. And so this is an estimate, the 4.1 million. There is no funding for this in the current year budget because this estimated that 4.1 million is what is estimated to what they'll need for the 2024 election. They have an annual allocation from the city of 1.4 million. That's not included in that 4.1. That 4.1 is really the estimated marginal increase that they will need and be asking for as part of the 24-25 budget. And then finally, we have the costs here on the governance and facilities with council chambers, council workplaces, and the mayor and city administrator workplaces. These three kind of cost categories equal about 7.2 million. That's what's in the current year budget. It doesn't, not included in the slide are estimates around district offices. That's still something that's being developed, given discussions over the past several work sessions with Maddie Souter and her team. And so as that information is being developed, they will be coming back to you and sharing that information. So that is kind of that is a work in progress, but the estimates around those three cost categories within the facilities work remain the same. So with that, so we've spent about 2.4 million, and the 3-year cost estimates remain the same as was, I believe this slide was presented in August, and that total still remains the same, which is about $19.9 million, or 20 million if you want to round up. So yeah, that is a super quick overview of the expenditures to date, and then the various categories that are consistent with what was presented in August.
Thank you so much. I'd like to open up the floor for questions now. So please raise your virtual hand. And Zach, I've got you first.
Thanks, Shannon. Appreciated the presentation. I had a question on that third row, which was for those who are watching in, the community engagement, communications, and community bodies for the transition. I'm curious. We had the presentation just prior about media and our general outreach from the city. And I'm curious if there is any like contingency funds or things to support translation of materials and that kind of thing. Because I imagine there will be much more material being generated as major decisions like what's going on right now in council are being made and the need for that to be translated. So I'm curious if that's the line item that captures it, if there is a line item that captures the kind of contingency and the outreach.
Sure. And I can start, and then my colleagues that are on the call that have information too, feel free to augment what my statements. But so the transit, what you're mentioning here is captured in two places. The first, it is in the community engagement or the transition project and administration sort of bucket. It is definitely captured there. It's also captured in the voter education piece. So that contract and one of the contract with United Way does include translation and interpretation as well. So, and then the kind of the media piece that you also mentioned is also included as both actuals as well as a budget and cost estimates for next year are also included in those numbers that were presented.
May I ask a follow-up question just for clarification? So is the contract that we have with United Way, is that obligating them to find the translation services with their contract and subcontracting that way, or is it they will seek, as we have, seeking city resources and support to do this kind of work? Because I could imagine there's a bit of a question mark if United Way is banking on leveraging the city's resources to do that translation and extra attention.
Yeah, I don't have, I mean, it's built into the contract, the cost estimate. Julia, do you have like further information on how that actually, like, that would work?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, if I understand the question though, I mean, if it is in a contract, they're not going to come back to the city and pay the city to do it. So it would be something that they would procure on their own.
And we do procure translation and interpretation services as well. So that is something that we do go to outside vendors as well for that work.
Lori?
Yeah, I was curious on the same line item. I'm assuming that a lot of the money that was spent this year was on the consulting services supporting the districting commission. And so given the community bodies, I think the only ones left are us for the next year.
That's right.
Engagement of, do we have plans already for spending that $500,000, or should we be talking about that, or realizing that that's a resource for engagements that we're doing to somehow entice people to come, or what? I just wondered what we were doing with that money.
So that money is, well, again, that doesn't, the delta that you've identified isn't necessarily what's in the budget this year. It's a cost estimate over a 3-year period. So just to, yeah, so that money and the programming for that has all been budgeted for this fiscal year. We can go kind of talk more about it in the next, I believe it's on the agenda for the next one, what kind of our plans are for next year, and what the budget ask could be. Which we can get a little bit more into detail about what that could look like for GTAC and what the plans are for that.
I'm not sure I understood. So when we looked at the two columns, one was the actuals and the second column was the total, or?
It's a cost estimate over a 3-year period for that body of work.
Okay, so there's $500,000 left for the remaining
Through,
time.
exactly. And through June 30th of 2025.
Right, okay. And all I was saying is if GTAC is the only community body, I was just curious if there's plans for that $500,000 over the next year and a half, or is that plans we need to develop?
There are plans for this year, but for next year, right now they're just preliminary cost estimates. So I think that is part of the work to be done, is to develop those plans.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Fred?
Yeah, I know we're running short on time. We've heard a lot of testimony yesterday and today the council did about how expensive all of this is. And I hope that we can capture and evaluate how much of the one-time costs are really not necessitated per se by the transition. For instance, facilities decided, and I agree wholeheartedly with their conclusion, that all the heat pumps that are 30 years old in City Hall need to be replaced in some kind of succession, as does all the wiring to bring us up to a better virtual electronic communicative entity. How much of that it can be distinguished from what was necessary to revise the council chambers and the alone and the counselors' offices. That also the same concept goes to the transition team costs, that some of those FTEs were already pre-existing in the budget office, yours, for instance, or whoever else's, that were already employees. They're just being dedicated for this period to the transition team effort. And so I think we need to be cognizant of that, understand maybe how much of that is the case, so that we're not saying these are new costs to the city, but they're just identified existing costs that have been identified as part of the transition project cost. I think that would help the public understand a little better what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe?
I want to address the same line item that Lori and Zach talked about. We've got pretty ambitious community engagement goals in this group, and I think we ought to know what our budget is and what we might be able to spend it on. Every time we've talked about underserved communities, we've talked about the importance of partnering with community-based organizations and the fact that they're already at their sort of maximum capacity, and that we need to, essentially compensate them for their extra work to help us out. I think it's really important for us to know what our budget is and to be able to attach that to our work plan.
I mean, you certainly have a budget for this body of work. I can give you the exact number if you're interested. I can share it with Julia and we can talk about it more. But to be clear, a budget does exist for this body of work, as well as cost estimates for next year as well.
Great. Thank you. I think I probably speak for everyone when I say we would be interested in that information. Destiny.
Just kind of following up of that, of how we can take ownership of the community engagement part as the public body of co-developing, kind of like we just did with our work plan of what we would like to see that budget be spent on this budget and the next fiscal year. Things like, city staff is busy. So like, how can we support city staff that have skill sets of different languages or things like that within our budget? As they work within the city, professional development, work partnering with our partners. So I think it would be great to take up a little bit more ownership of co-drafting what that budget shows. That way, the public also knows what we're spending it on, and building trust that way and transparency.
Thank you, Destiny. Fred, I see your hand is still raised
Oh, shoot,
from before.
sorry.
It's okay. It happens. Does anyone else have other questions that they want to ask at this time? And I will just reiterate that it sounds like there's broad committee interest in information about what the budget for GTAC might be so that we can figure out how to best use it. So let's plan to discuss that at one of our upcoming meetings, and hopefully we'll have more information.
Yeah, I can certainly get that ready for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And with that, I want to check in quickly to see if Shoshana is ready for an update on facilities improvements.
Hi, Shoshana Oppenheim, she, they pronouns. I'm going to have my camera off. I just got back from a council session. I thought that Julia had asked for an update on the council session as a whole. Specifically, your questions about the facilities. I just want to make sure I have the right question for you.
Well, mainly it's been facilities has been the hot topic lately in the work sessions. It's been being discussed a lot. So we thought getting a brief update as to where those discussions were headed would be great. But if you have other updates, especially of the meeting tonight that we didn't get to see, we would very much love to hear that.
Sure. Well, I'll start with facilities. There was an amendment attached to the city organizational chart tonight offered by Commissioner Ryan that had some more specificity about facilities, and at the end of discussion that was actually withdrawn. So the next thing that we'll see on the facilities front is the mayor is developing a resolution that should be coming to council, I believe, on November 8th. Is that a Wednesday? I think it's November 8th. That outlines the general agreement that work on the chambers will start January 1 of 2024, and work on the workspaces will start July 1, 2024. So those are the broad parameters that will be reflected in a resolution that's coming forward from the mayor's office. I'm gonna follow up tomorrow to make sure I have all the facts right, but I think that that's where it was left at the end of a 4.5 hour work session. Maybe it was 5 hour council session. It felt like 6 hours. So, but broadly, the good news is that the city organizational chart that our city org team has been working on was adopted by the council. It was amended in several ways, to include some work around natural areas, and the resolution also was amended to be more specific about the council roles and authorities during this time. But the broad takeaway is that the city org work is moving forward, and we are still kind of distilling. I'm trying to count the resolutions. I think there were 9. I'm sorry, the amendments. I think there were 9. So the impact of those amendments is still a little unclear, but generally, the big broad takeaway is the organizational chart was adopted, and we'll have the revised structure provided on our website, I believe, tomorrow morning. That has all of the amendments, that includes where different pieces of the city are actually moving based on those amendments.
Thank you, Shoshana. And just to give people a little background also on the facilities part, because I don't know if everyone is familiar with what's been happening. Facilities proposed something to the council with how they wanted everything to go, and it became a big issue where it became a lot more difficult than people expected it to. And there were a lot of discussions surrounding that. Shoshana, the dates you gave, the January 2024 and the July 2024 dates, how are those compared to the dates that were originally proposed?
Jose, it has actually been a pretty lengthy conversation. So I think that the original recommendations were for all renovations to start in January 1 of 2024. But I feel like we've been having the dates go back and forth quite a bit. So I don't know if that was actually the original resolution. But I think that what I'm hearing in your question is about the mayor's proposal versus, kind of meeting the needs of the existing council. So I think that the resolution that you'll see coming out of the mayor's office is really a compromise between the mayor's proposal and kind of what the council feels they need in order to fill out their terms through 2024.
Before I go to the questions, I want to follow up to that. Because I know a lot of the discussions were around everything starting at the same time because it saves a ton of money to have the contractors start at the same time. Will the proposal by the mayor have numbers as to how that will affect the budget? Or do we know yet?
What you'll see next. So you'll see that resolution, and then very shortly thereafter, you'll see what's called the guaranteed maximum price. And so that guaranteed maximum price is working with the contractor to develop a price based on the scope. So that the start time is part of the scope, which will be built into the guaranteed maximum price. So that's where you'll see the cost implications of the schedule.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It also makes sense why starting at the same time would be cheaper, because you're doing demo and you need giant dumpsters. That's all at once instead of spreading it out.
Yeah,
I knew they also didn't want to be.
There are those synergies between the demolition that needs to happen and the construction and mobilizing and demobilizing the construction crews. But what we learned at the most recent council work session on facilities was that the elements of construction within the workspaces are actually pretty modest. And it's so the contractor is really hoping to both reduce the schedule for the workspace work to accommodate this July 1 start date. So I know that Maddie would love to give you another update, and so I'm probably going to defer the nitty gritty details. I'm more of like a home remodeler and definitely not a city hall remodeler. I mean, I don't even know if I'm a home remodeler. I'm okay at a few things.
You're just trying to, Zach?
Thanks, Jose, and thank you, Shoshana and Zach Curl. It's a related question because it's just been such a hard thread to follow across different work sessions. But the question that I have related to the dates and the facilities update is more about how council will operate so that we can communicate that when we're out in the community. So last I had heard there was going to be a required time period in which council will be held remotely. I think what I remember was like between Thanksgiving and the end of the year timeframe, and then it would be held in the 1900 building. Has that changed? If you have any of those insights.
No, that's exactly right, Zach. You've got that correctly. So what they're going to do is they're going to, during that holiday time, demobilize the current council chambers and then move the equipment to the temporary council chambers at the 1900 building. And then they will start construction on the chambers And because of the complexity of that project, I do know this, because of the complexity of that project, the timeline for that work is a year. And the scope of the workspaces is smaller. So they're estimating about a 6-month project for that. I'm 99% sure of everything I just said.
Thank you.
Joe?
Yeah, Shoshana, you may have just answered this. My question is whether starting in July 2024 will allow the new council to move into their offices in January 2025.
I think we will know more about that when we get the guaranteed maximum price. I think that's everyone's optimistic that will be the case. So I think we'll know more about that in the coming weeks.
And that is the goal.
That is what is in the original resolution, is that the workspaces are available for the council January 1, 2025.
When you say the original resolution, has that been changed?
No, there has not
Okay.
been a substitute resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Amy?
I had the same exact questions about where they were going to end up working.
Good.
My question, Shoshana, is about the new counselors' aides and the district offices. So has any thought been given to whether when they're in their district offices, will they have an aide or 2 aides with them? And how's that going to work? Would one aide go with them out into the field and the others stay at City Hall, or would everybody go? And is there room for that in the offices that they had identified? Or are we not there yet?
That's a good question. So I think that we have the preliminary staffing proposal, which will be in the organizational chart that we post on the council on our transition website tomorrow. It currently includes 2 staff for each council member, and I believe 3 staff people in the mayor's office. And then additional shared staff and administrative staff for each district. I think it is up to the counselors to tell us what they need in terms of operating their district office, their shared district office. So I think that the plan is to accommodate staff with hoteling space and counselors with meeting space, but we're just not far enough down that path yet, because we are just now getting the timelines on when we can start the construction. And in terms of the district offices, I think they're still identifying appropriate space for the counselors to use. And I think there is, so I think we're still early in that process.
Right, so they haven't defined that as a requirement, or have they?
What is defined, or what I understand the district offices will include is hoteling space and office space. How those spaces are used, I think, will be up to the new counselors. Some may be in the office every day and in the district office every day. Others may choose to be in the community every day, or schedule all their meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays and be downtown on Mondays and Wednesdays. So I think there's still a lot of pieces at play, which includes, like, when are the committee meetings being held? Do we have committee meetings twice a week, and then full council meetings the next week? So the council schedule, I think, will dictate how the district offices are used. And I think that this is an area that I know Maddie was planning on engaging with you, as well as Tate was also planning on engaging with you related to districts, or to in phase 2. So there's definitely an opportunity for you folks to engage on this issue, but that's generally, we know that there'll be staff. We know that there'll be district offices. We know that there'll be downtown workspaces. So how all of those pieces fit together will be informed by additional conversations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see a question in the chat. Shoshana, can you explain what hoteling space is?
Sure. So hoteling spaces are more like drop-in spaces. So maybe you have a few spaces which could be used by a variety of different people. Maybe they don't have pictures of their family or their favorite pencils at those locations, but they have all of their other work needs. So it's like more of a drop-in space where you can just use it for the day. Maybe you're there for 2 hours. I remember from my time working for an elected, I would be in a lot of different spaces in one day. And so I might just need some touchdown space. So where I can respond to emails, make some phone calls, and then kind of jump into the next meeting with the elected. So but think of it more as a touchdown space that's available, has all of your needs met, but is available for me for 2 hours if I need it for 2 hours, for June for 3 hours if she needs it for 3 hours. And, when Jose comes in, we all give up our spaces for Jose.
What do you know, Shoshana, when the next work session or council session to discuss this is going to be?
Specifically around workspaces. I don't think that there's going to be another work session. What I think you'll see is another resolution, and it'll be specific to the timelines related to facilities. And I expect that to be on November 8th.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the calendar right now to make sure that that's a Wednesday. Yeah, November 8th.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, I have a question. Have they mentioned at all because originally once facilities proposed everything, they didn't have anything for district offices and were saying they're going to wait till the new council arrived to make that decision. Now they're looking at coalition offices as the way to get them offices in the meantime. Have they talked about how that's going to be budgeted or how it's going to affect the budget or anything around that part of it at all?
I think that they're still exploring the viability of all of those, of the coalition offices. So the budget would be informed by those decisions, which coalition offices are the right coalition offices. But my understanding, the last time I heard about it, so this is something to verify with Maddie, was that it was with minimal construction costs. So it was to make those spaces available and workable for the new council members, make sure that they have district spaces on day, when they start, and they will still have the opportunity to make decisions about permanent, ongoing, if this is the right location. So yeah, I think it's a light touch for the first round of district offices, and then there'll be a more robust conversation with the council when they're available or when they're elected.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone that hasn't gotten a chance to maybe ask a question? Joe? Joe?
Oh, there it goes.
Jose, could I just ask Shoshana if the upshot of what you just said is that hopefully the new counselors will have both a downtown office and a district space to use when they take office.
That's the hope, yes.
Great.
Cindy?
Thank you. My Zoom is kind of slow and I'm having computer issues. Mine is more of a general question of like, we got the facilities presentation. I felt like the takeaways were very positive from our committee and answered a lot of our questions. And then looking through the work sessions, a lot of the same questions had been asked. And I pointed it out of like, how can we open up communication to better support in clarity and like supporting, advising on like proposals that facility pushes in the forward, like as a current example of where I personally wish GTAC would have had better open communication with City Council. How do we work, and is there a way to work towards making that communication better in the future when other proposals or resolutions move forward?
I think that that's a really important question for us to spend some time with. I know that our team is currently working on our work plan for the remaining 12 months of the transition. And I'd like to come back to this group with our work plan and really look at what those meaningful places of engagement and where it would be useful. I think our first stop is to talk to you about our budget proposal and where we're planning and hoping to make investments and to ask council to make investments in a very constrained budget. So having your support around our budget request is, I think, one of those places where having you vet it and ask us the tough questions, us being able to answer those questions and then be prepared to have those conversations with City Council. I could see other opportunities like that for the GTAC. But that's having just come out of that 6 hour or that session that felt like 6 hours. That's where my mind's at.
Fair enough.
Thank you, Shoshana.
Yeah.
Any last questions? I will just say I really appreciate the update. I think too often, or we don't talk about what's happened recently often enough is what I'm trying to say. And I'm happy that you came and gave us an update on all that information. And some of it just happened minutes ago. So
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy to come on the regular. I know I'm there pretty often, and anytime that you can make time in your agenda for this kind of conversation, I'm happy to participate.
Thank you. Good to know. Now I'll turn to Leah.
Sounds great. Shoshana, we appreciate your insight all the time, but especially this evening when you're coming straight from that 4.5-hour work session. So I just want to express gratitude there for coming this evening. Okay, I'm going to move on to some next steps that I've got for us then. I have 2 reminders for people, just to make sure they didn't get lost in email. First, please let Julia know if you would like to attend a work group meeting about revisions to Title 15 on the emergency code. You can email directly about that. And then a reminder that I'm excited about. Jose and I discussed and asked if we could extend an invite to Mayor Wheeler to attend one of our meetings. And I'm grateful to hear that he's accepted and will be at our November 15th meeting. So please, if you have any topics or questions that you would like to see him discuss and address at the next meeting, email the co-chairs and Julia by the end of day tomorrow. We've extended that slightly just to give people a little bit more time to think about it. Okay. And as always, any questions that were not answered during the meeting will receive answers in writing, and all of it will be posted online. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the committee's website and is available after the meeting ends on the Office of Management and Finance YouTube channel as well. We've got some other exciting meetings coming up. Subcommittees are happening. The first meeting of the Voter and Candidate Education and Outreach Subcommittee is on Tuesday, November 7th. Okay? And then the first meeting of the Districts and Council Operations Subcommittee is Monday, November 13th. Following that, our next full committee meeting is Wednesday, November 15th. Just want to point out, that's an exciting one, not only because the mayor will be visiting us, but because we're going to get a recap of the 1 year anniversary, essentially, of charter reform. And so we'll get to look back on things, and it'll be a great meeting. Not that they aren't all, but it will be good. Okay, next slide, please. Here is a quick overview of our proposed upcoming schedule. Once again, this is just an outline. We can always change it based on people's requests or interests for it. As I said, next time at meeting number 14, we'll be getting status updates and an annual report in addition to having a visit from the mayor. Does anyone have any questions with the 4 minutes that we have remaining? I thank you all for your time and your presence and look forward to seeing you at subcommittees and the full committee soon. Joe.
Yeah, I just wonder if we could maybe have another day to give you our questions for the mayor. It seems like there's going to be a lot to digest from a 6.5 hour meeting that they just had and that we really barely know anything about.
Julia, I'm going to look to you for the answer on that.
Yes, I would, I'm gonna be out for a few days, so if you could send them to June, if it's after tomorrow.
Okay. So say to June by the end of the day on Friday, the 3rd. Great. Sounds good. Thank you all. With that.